The story of the Harrison Gents begins in the year 1957 when a group of Puerto Rican, Irish and African American boys from Harrison and Western in the near West Side neighborhood were forced to protect their neighborhood from invading gang like the Egyptian Cobras, Taylor Street Dukes, Clovers and Imperial Chaplains. The gangs were hungry for dominance and wanted to take over this main intersection. These kids at this intersection were good kids that were well-mannered and especially were respectful to women of all ages. Basically, they were well-behaved gentlemen. The problem was they were also bullied and attacked by gangs which drove them to fight almost every day. In the year 1959, the boys decided it was time to organize into a gang and they had no choice due to constant invasions. They decided on the name Harrison Gents because they were from Harrison Street and the gents part came from the fact they were gentlemen to women. They chose the color purple because it was a popular zoot suit color back then. The HGs began congregating just down the block at Claremont Playlot located at 2334 West Flournoy Street, Flournoy and Western. This is where they congregated and swelled in numbers in the 1960s. The HGs eventually advanced east down to Damon Avenue and encompassed Damon Avenue to Western Avenue and Harrison Street to Flournoy. This was all just about 2 blocks away from the Taylor Street gangs and not far from the Vice Lords of North Lawndale. In the year 1964, some Puerto Rican members of the Harrison Gents migrated to the East Village neighborhood at Ashland and Thomas. This section was started by JV and this put them into direct conflict with the Latin Kings that were arriving at the same time at Ashland and Cortez during the Great Puerto Rican Migration to West Town area. The gents that arrived here also slugged it out viciously with the P.V.P.S. that became one of their arch-enemies. Ashland and Thomas was the first section that came right after Harrison and Western. Harrison Gents in this section also fought against the Gaylords from near Eckhart Park. After a very short time the Harrison Gents of Ashland and Thomas moved to Ashland and Beach. In 1964 the Gents also arrived in the Wicker Park neighborhood at the Lemoyne and Paulina where they battled Gaylords and P.V.P.S. These Gents also hung near Humboldt Park at Lemoyne and California. Here they would protect those attacked by Gaylords. This section would only survive into the 1970s. In the year 1964, the Harrison Gents arrived in the Uptown neighborhood at the intersection of Kenmore and Ainsley when Puerto Ricans and African American were first migrating there. This was also the first time the Gents recruited white members into the gang. Another gang that settled 1 block away was the Latin Kings. Right away the Gents and Kings were met by the Young Lords and Latin Eagles street gangs from the nearby Lakeview neighborhood. Immediate gang brawls were breaking out between the 4 gangs. Latin Eagles and Young Lords were allies and teamed up on Kings and Gents, therefore Latin Kings and Harrison Gents became very close allies. In the midst of the war between Harrison Gents and Latin Eagles, the Latin Eagles killed the leader of the Gents which angered the Gents. However, they did not get revenge until 1975 when they burned down the house of a Latin Eagle gang member near the intersection of Fremont and Addison in the Wrigleyville section of the Lakeview neighborhood. A 13-year-old girl was killed in the fire while members of the Harrison Gents were arrested. Chicago Tribune P39, December 7, 1975. In the year 1966 Puerto Rican members of the Gents from Harrison and Western migrated to the Little Village community onto the 26th Street area. This group of Gents arrived alongside a Puerto Rican and Mexican migration wave to Little Village that took place in 1967. This brought several new gangs to the area from other parts of the city. The newly arrived Gents found conflict with the Latin Kings as the Gents befriended the Latin Counts from 25th and California. This section would last until 1977 when the 2-6 gang began and members of the Gents flipped to 2-6. In the year 1968, the Harrison Gents found common ground with the Ashland Vikings because of their mutual hatred for Latin Kings and P.V.P. This was the beginning of a very close alliance between the 2 gangs. The Harrison Gents would soon gain more popularity because of their ruthless ways and making the newspaper. On June 24, 1969 several members of the Harrison Gents paid a visit to the Lathrop projects on Clybourne Avenue to start problems with the Young Lords that were living there. The exact address this was happening was at 2852 Clybourne Avenue which is near the intersection of Clybourne and George in the North Center neighborhood. The Young Lords were an activist group by 1969 and were no longer all about the gang banging, but the Harrison Gents had ticked them off and got them to fight. The fight was nasty and heated, and the Gents were likely getting the better of the Young Lords because when the police arrived and tried to stop it, a few officers were accidentally struck by HGs that had tunnel vision and bashing anyone in sight. The Gents tried to play nice and help the officers after hitting them, but the cops still turned around and arrested them. In the year 1979, the Insane Family was first created by the Spanish Cobras. This is when Harrison Gents joined the Insane group. In the year 1979, bad blood developed between the Harrison Gents and Latin Kings in Uptown. Conflicts led to the Latin Kings killing a Harrison Gent that year, and full-fledged war began. Now the Gents from Uptown were joining their fellow Gents from West Town in a war against the Latin Kings. One of the main reasons the Gents didn't join folks in 1978 was because of the Uptown alliance with the Latin Kings, but after this incident they were open to joining folks, and in 1980 when the Folk Alliance opened to new gangs, the Gents got in right away. Many Harrison Gents were incarcerated by 1980, so they were approached to join the Spanish Gangster Disciple Alliance behind bars, which earned them a Folk Alliance offering. In the year 1981, the Harrison Gents were now folks on the streets after it was now spread to the streets that year.